Welcome to Dungeon Master Talk, the podcast for Dungeon Masters by Dungeon Masters. I am Dungeon Master Kyle, and with me today, as always, is...
Dungeon Master Shea. How are you, Kyle?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself, Shea?
Doing pretty good, man. Baseball teams are starting to heat up, and... Oh, wait, no, we're talking D&D, sorry.
I was going to say, if we're talking... We should have like an hour sports fandom podcast as much as we talk about it at the start. It's weird. Listeners, Shea and I will get together before this and we start talking, kind of trying to warm it up a little bit, and we don't bring up our sports teams.
I know.
And then we hit record and Shea's like, sports.
Exactly.
As you can tell, I'm a geek of a lot of things, and D&D is one of them. But sports is kind of also a second love of mine outside of my family. So, you know, when we, and the fact that Kyle and I agree on football teams, but our baseball teams are completely different. I won't go into...
I think my second favorite team is your primary team.
That's fair,
maybe.
But your first team, no, we don't have time to go into that. Welcome, everybody, to the show.
Everybody's entitled to be wrong, and you can be wrong too, Shea.
Okay, you can also be wrong.
Fair enough. Welcome, everybody, to Dungeon Master Talk, where we talk about how to be good game masters and or dungeon masters, pulling from advice from what Shea and I have gleaned over our combined years of being a dungeon master, primarily in Dungeons & Dragons 5e, but we do try to branch the advice out to work for other tabletop role-playing games. Shea, what are we talking about today?
Well, today we are going to talk about T-Raps and Puzzles. I mean, traps and puzzles. That was what I affectionately was calling the episode today when I was ad-libbing with Kyle this morning. And wait, is it morning?
I really
don't know
like
what
puzzles.
time it is. We're not recording at our normal time, everybody, so this is going to be kind of different.
Yeah, if I sound tired, it's because I am tired.
There's a slight possibility of a maybe that I might be visited by a small barbarian monk. So, because my druid is out visiting the forests of another land, and my barbarian monk has been with me all week, so he might make an appearance at some point, depending on if his show continues to keep playing or not.
Well, my animal familiar is also free roaming, so we will see how that works as well.
But anyway, traps and puzzles. So, as a dungeon master, I believe it is really fun when you can throw in a good trap or puzzle to your party, especially when you get the spectrum of players that some of them could either care less for puzzles and some of them could like go fanatically nuts over puzzles. And when you have a good puzzle that kind of can get everybody involved at the same time, that's when you know you're kind of doing it right. Not that there's necessarily a right or wrong way to do things, but it's a lot better engagement with your players.
Yeah, I've backpacking on that. There's no right or wrong. I think there can be right or wrong in the context of your own group, but what works, just like a lot of advice that we give, what works for one group may have varying degrees of success with another group. With my current campaign, I've done a few puzzles, not as many as I honestly would like to have done yet, primarily due to our play cadence, but we had one that I can recall vividly because of how spectacularly it didn't land. My party can attest to I have not always been the best at giving visual representations of the game. A couple years ago, at the very beginning of what I dubbed Season 2 for my campaign, not Season 2 of this podcast, we had a Vegas on a boat, and the whole thing was there was a devil that was controlling the boat in secret. And there was a long hallway that the party, their rooms were on one end, the captain's room was at the very end of the hallway. Mm-hmm. And right before the captain's room, there was a series of paintings. And I described these paintings so many times, down to the number of each being represented, that's the actual word, in the paintings. The puzzle to unlock the door so that they could enter and also reveal what was going on was to spell the word devil. Mm-hmm. The first painting had one dragon, the next painting had two elves, so on and so forth. So if they would have taken the first letter of the thing in the painting and put it into the position of the word equal to the number of them that were represented, then they would unlock it. Unfortunately, my party, they asked about the the paintings several times. And I described them in great detail, more than I've ever described an item to them before, to hopefully give a clue that this was important. Ultimately, they broke the door down. So they did not solve the puzzle. They did not put a lot of interest into the puzzle. And so that was a time where I had a puzzle that just flat didn't work for my playgroup.
Yeah. And I think for puzzles too, it is a really delicate balance. And I think the better, obviously it's kind of like the more you can kind of give them up front, the better. Mm-hmm. As like a session prep, like saying your description out loud, like it's really hard to, and I think you talked about this too. Like you've talked to your wife about some of either the bits that you've put us through, or like maybe a trap or something like that you've come up with. You try to explain it to her and see if it's something like that she would pick up on, like through the verbal component.
Yep.
Did that work pretty well for you? Like talking to somebody that was like outside of the game to see how well that visual gets painted?
Yeah. So honestly, this prep, I think, was a little bit part of my problem. I went over this puzzle ad nauseum with another DM that I'm friends with outside the game. We used to work together and talked to him about it quite a bit. And he raised to me at first, he was like, hey, if this is like completely nuanced, out of left field, something new to your game, you may just need to bring extra attention to that. This may matter. So I described him a bunch to try to bring that extra attention. I think in hindsight, part of why this didn't work is there was so much going on visually and descriptively in this new setting. Mm-hmm. Like, it was a fun atmosphere that I had provided on the ship. There was a bunch of new characters. There was a lot of stuff that was described that day. It wasn't like you entered into a cold, dark chamber. The light is dimly lit, except for these 5 paintings where light shines down upon them, and they are golden bordered in their settings, and each one depicts it. That wasn't the setting. It was this very busy setting. So while I described that far more than everything else in the setting, there was so much in the setting that needed described. And I think that's where it fell short, because they were focused on the number of doors in the hallway. They could tell that they had done an Arcana check and could tell that the door was magic and it was the only magic thing, because the paintings themselves were not magic. They were just the clues. So ultimately, they were able to bust through the door. Actually, Shea's character was the one that achieved the feat of breaking down the door. In my notes, the door was not actually supposed to be... Yeah, you did. But also, my note said the door could not physically be broken down, but I took pity upon the party after an hour and a half of being in front of this door. And Shea rolled like a 19 or something, so I was like, all right, he's a big, strong lad. He can get through here. I think, like, the key with puzzles is the setting kind of has to afford for the puzzle, allow for, enable the puzzle to take place. And there, I feel like I kind of came, like, this was a hallway on a boat. Yes, there's things I could have done puzzle-wise there. I think this painting one just really didn't fit. They were too sidelined. I think if I actually had a visual representation of this hallway and highlighting these paintings, and maybe even visual representations of the paintings themselves, I am no artist, though, it would have allowed that type of puzzle to work. And I know that type of puzzle has worked with other groups. So I think it's what works for your group, because I've done a lot of riddles. Had a riddle that ended with the party having to wish happy birthday to another member of the party. That was a big success and big hit with the party. Had another riddle once for a brand new player, and she solved them. Like, I'm gonna have to get stronger with my riddles, because like there was a riddle for a bat and she solved it before I was done saying the riddle. So I'm gonna have to get more clever to account for her. But those have worked really well.
And I think too, when you break it down into something like that, you'll really find out who your critical thinkers are versus like your RP nuts. And sometimes like your RP nuts and your critical thinkers can be the same person, but sometimes even your critical thinkers aren't necessarily like your heavy combat people either. So I think what happens in that respect too is that kind of gives them a secondary chance to shine. And, you know, sometimes like your critical thinkers will tend to go more towards like your wizard classes or your more intelligent type based classes that are dodging my brain right now.
Cleric.
I want to say, oh shoot,
Warlock,
no, they're charisma.
to a degree.
No, sorcerer's charisma. Warlock, I think, is wisdom.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and cleric is not intelligence stat based either.
No. But all of that to say, like, it gives them a sense to be able to shine in more than one capacity. Like, and sometimes you do get like your heavy fighters that are your critical thinkers and they're just naturally good at that stuff too. But it just really gives everybody a real chance to get into the RPing, like we've kind of talked about in previous episodes, gives them that kind of like hook to bring them in to play their character and like, okay, how would your character solve this puzzle or this and honestly, it's not like you're going to be like, oh, this is a puzzle that you are walking into, but like as you can kind of lay those foundational clues to say, hey, this picture looks like X, this picture looks like Y, and they're like, wait a minute.
Well, and sometimes it is obvious that you've entered into a puzzle. Like, for example, if I was like, you have entered into a chamber adorned with intricate clockwork mechanisms and symbols. The party encounters a large ornate clock standing on one wall. Its handles are stuck in place, and below it there's a plaque that reads, to unravel time secrets and progress forth, align the handles to the hour of worth within this chamber where seconds chime, unlock the path to the future's prime. That's obvious now. You're at a puzzle. Like, you could put giant neon sign, puzzle here.
Right as that happens, you hear as the door closes. So,
Yeah, and you lock them in. There's some of my favorite puzzles I've been a player in, and some of my favorite puzzles that I DM'd in is, hey, you cannot escape until you solve this puzzle. There's the ones where, water's flooding the room, so you have that added time rush to it, and it's like, hey, and we're going to do this kind of like rounds of combat, and 8 rounds, the chamber's going to be flooded. Solve the puzzle.
You better think quick.
Yeah, I've always been far more lenient than that. So there's times like that where it's like, hello, puzzle, and you got to solve it. There's other times where it's like, hey, here's this extra stuff. If you solve it, it is going to make this story, this area easier for you because you're going to know something or have access to something you didn't before. But you, just like combat, you can have alternate ways out of it, like his character busting down the door instead of solving the puzzle. That also didn't allow them to sneakily enter the captain's chamber, and so combat started then. Whereas if they solved the puzzle, they would have came into the sleeping captain's chamber. So there's, a lot of things that can go differently if you allow your party to have that kind of freedom in the world.
I think, too, we talk about auditory descriptions that you can do, but if you can draw a map or import a picture, or if you're one of those DMs that can build a set and kind of show you the map, use all of those things too, because like you can kind of incorporate what they're hearing to what they're seeing and not just kind of like their mental picture of what's going on. But like if you can kind of tie it together on an image or a map or like a set that you can build for that, definitely incorporate that as much as you can, because I think that will kind of help your players to really engage in what's going on outside of just the auditory part of it.
Yeah, and that's a big part of why I've worked on having those visual representations, because I love theater of the mind. But one thing that I've learned over the last few years is even like the amazing descriptors out there, like thinking even outside of D&D roleplay, like Token. You read his books, he's great at describing things. He loves to paint a scene, and he uses very descriptive words. And people still have a different image in their head than what somebody else has who read the exact same passage. Each of our theaters is different. They're painted by our expectations, our biases, our history, and what we're desiring this to look like. It paints that. So even if you are incredible at painting a scene, it is going to be slightly different to each player. And so the more tools that you can use at your disposal to, especially something like this, because most of the time allowing it to be different for each character is fun. But when it's a puzzle, obviously those fine details can matter.
And I don't want to shoot down the theater of the mind concept too. Like if you're really great and your players tend to pick up on your auditory cues like that, don't feel like we're saying like you have to go to like the extreme of building everything or like drawing everything out.
No.
But it can definitely, if it's something like your party's starting to struggle with, if you can draw it out or something like that, that can kind of help you in that respect as well.
And honestly, sometimes I don't draw it out because my artist skills are so bad that it honestly hinder.
It gives them a -5 to perception checks.
Yes, because it won't match. I can picture it perfectly in my head, and I can spend hours with my pen to that paper, and it won't. It just won't. Like when people say that they are not artists, I challenge that I am more of a non-artist than you.
Yeah, like no, you don't understand. I take not being an artist to an extra bad level. Like it's,
and I want to be like after years I've learned how to draw a semi-passable dragon. And honestly, I had an art teacher tell me how by drawing an S, then drawing another S kind of close to it, then make a triangle for the tail and a blob for the head.
You know, I actually just passed the other day trying to draw fat stick people. That's kind of how bad my art drawing skills are. And it's even worse if somebody says, "Hey, can you do this in Photoshop?" I'm like,
yeah, no, I can't.
No.
So honestly, there are tools out there. I'm blanking on the names right now. If I remember them later, I'll have Shea include them links. But I normally Google for D&D puzzle help. Just is there something that can give me a visual representation for the puzzle I have in mind? And there has been times that I've altered my puzzles based on what I could find online as a visual representation, because I have members of my party who, like, they appreciate my verbal descriptions, but they thrive on that visual representation, which is a big part of where my lacking was as a DM for years. So I've tried really hard to grow in that usage of maps, drawing what I can draw. And then also there is a member of my party who she is a fantastic artist. And so in the future, I have not yet to date, but in the future I plan on having her help me. But my hard part is, how do I have her help me with these without giving her the answer? So that's why I haven't yet. Because then it's just going to be like, everyone can solve this, not you.
I have a player, and granted, this guy's been playing longer than about as long as he's been alive, but he's very good at separating the player from the character knowledge. And so if you have a character as a DM, like if you have somebody who is a really good artist, but can also do a very good job of separating those two things and like RPing in the moment versus like, oh yeah, I know exactly what's going on. That definitely helps in that respect. I would urge you to do it as best you can. And, you know, but then again, now that I think about it, like AI has come a long way, even in the last like 3 months. So if that's something that you could use or you're inclined to use, maybe that might be a way to draw some of your puzzles as well. I'll be honest with you, I'm not very good with it. I've never really used it.
Yeah.
I would wonder if that would be something that could help.
I think like there's a fine line there with AI, right? Because like we definitely don't. I love the art that is applied to the things I enjoy, like comics, D&D, Magic the Gathering. And so I never want that to be generated by AI. For me, Joe Schmo, I can't afford to pay an artist like that to just make a trap. For my campaign, yeah, I will unashamed leverage AI for that once it's to a point that it's a little bit better, because I've seen some of the stuff that's gorgeous and some stuff that is the fuel of nightmares. And so I don't want to expose myself too much to the latter.
It's one of those things where like finding that balance, like obviously like we would love to support local artists and help to like boost that community and really empower that community to keep drawing, because I mean, we can't, but we as DMs we can appreciate the art that those communities can draw and produce, and it's just absolutely amazing. At the same time, like you said, it's not like it's always affordable for every situation, and especially if it's going to be like a one-off thing, it's kind of hard to justify sometimes getting an artist involved. Like I could justify it, like if you're doing like a big world map or something like that, or like
and
a whole
it's going to
dungeon.
come back to it a lot.
Yeah. But like if you're going to zero in on like a specific room or something like that, like it's really hard to kind of justify that unless that's just something that you have access to. And by all means, at that point, have at
honestly,
it.
I would be tempted if like the puzzle was going to be the final puzzle of my campaign that leads into the final boss fight, and I know it's the end, and I know it's coming for a long time. Then, yeah, like setting up my Zelda moment, or something like that. I would be tempted. But it would be. My wife would probably rein there. But then shifting gears slightly, we've mentioned a few times, like role-playing was brought up in here. There's a interesting, we like to role-play characters different than who we are. I have a engineer's mind. I'm an engineer by trade. I'm obviously not an engineer that has to draw anything, as you guys have gathered, but I have an analytical mind. I don't like to roleplay characters that are like me in that regard, and it's hard. But I like to roleplay kind of more creative or free-flowing thought characters, and the opposite is true. And there's so many different mind types. People's minds work in beautiful ways, and we often like to roleplay people who think differently than us. So as a DM, how do you handle the scenario where somebody's like, hey, I, living human being, cannot solve this math problem, but the character that I'm role-playing is a mathematical genius. And so they should be able to make perfect sense of this part of the puzzle. And so, we want to account for that. We want them to be able to be who they are role-playing, but we don't want to just be like, well, here's a free pass to solving all my puzzles. So, Shea, how do you handle those type of scenarios in your game?
That's a good question.
That's why I didn't reveal it to you before the session. Haha.
Fair enough. I think at that point, you really kind of have to weight scale your dice rolls, maybe more on the intelligence checks, or set your DCs higher, especially like if they're, for sake of argument, let's just say they're a wizard, right? Harry. Yep. So if they're a wizard and, anyway.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. If you are a Harry wizard or a wizard Harry, and you are naturally smarter because like intelligence is kind of your base stat, like that's kind of your main bread and butter, right?
Right.
So, I mean, you can give them outside clues, and really kind of help lead them along in that respect, but maybe put more weight on the dice roll itself.
Yep.
Because your character would know this, but your player character, like the person themselves, might be struggling a little bit. Maybe, just again, as much outside clue as you can. And the way I kind of think about this too is like, if you've ever watched The Voice,
yep,
or no, not The Voice, The Masked Singer. If they give clues about like their backgrounds and like accomplishments and stuff like that, there's like a lot of like outside detail, but they're very vague details that pertain to that person. So like, it could lead you in 1,000 different directions, but it's kind of poignant at the same time because it is specific to them. But the way you describe that is just outside. So like, for instance, they might be doing a story about this masked singer and it'll have a bright yellow star. Well, that could mean that they are on Hollywood Boulevard, or they could be an actress, a singer, a whatever. Like there's so many different routes.
Did something involving so like maybe they were in a movie that had a bright yellow star in it.
Producer could have been a editor, whatever. And like, obviously you don't want to get too vague because then it kind of defeats the purpose. You want to be poignant enough to kind of lead them in that direction, but not enough to where you're like, here's the answer on a silver platter. Like,
yeah, I like to roleplay by having additional, and it's more prep for the DM, but I think it is worth it because they buy in more. And so I have those additional clues for character X because, hey, their character is this is something they specialize in or would have knowledge in. And so, and the key is don't give away the answer on a dice roll. That's just not fun. I mean, it can't, if they've spent an exuberant amount of time and they're like, hey, listen, I'm not getting it, but I think my character would. I just want to roll a knowledge check, and so straight intelligence, and roll for it, and they natty 20, and they've been here for a long time. And it's clear that, like, hey, we probably would solve this, but we're going to be here forever. Then you can make that DM's call. But more often than not,
Yeah.
I like to have my characters have that sense of, it's like when you solve the puzzle in Zelda. Maybe Link would have actually got it sooner than I did, but I got it. Now I feel smart. And so you want them to have that sense of accomplishment.
Oh, for sure. And I think too, like if you're in a dungeon and they roll a nat 20, like right off the bat, I don't think you should give it to them, right? Like don't give them like the biggest key right off the bat. Like actually make them work for, like you could describe something that's, a little bit more in detail.
Or give additional clue.
Maybe one
or highlight
extra,
like this thing in the description that maybe didn't stand out initially.
Yeah, definitely don't just be like nat 20. Oh shoot, now the whole thing's blown. Like
you beautiful mind it in a moment. That can be funny one-off.
Yeah.
Maybe like if you're doing a goofy one-off that's not your mainline campaign and everybody's just having a good time and it's more about the camaraderie than the game, then sure. But like if you're I know me as a player, if that happened in a game that I was playing in, I would laugh and then I'd go, wait, like that was seriously it? Like that's all we had to do? Okay. Like now I'm just like, okay, then I'm just like, all right, every puzzle, everybody roll. Maybe we'll get a nat 20. We don't have to do this puzzle. It just cheapens it. It makes me not as excited to encounter a puzzle again. So I'd much rather have to actually do the puzzle.
Well, not to mention, like, if you do your puzzle right off the bat, that's supposed to lead you to like a big bad evil or something like that. I mean, it really shortens the length of the session, too, because, like, you've basically cut yourself probably 20, 30 minutes short of what material you had.
And I'm a guy that likes role play a little bit more than combat, so I really appreciate these moments where it's like, hey, we have something we're focused on, but go as your characters. Those interactions with other people and then like trying to suss it out. Those are some of my favorite memories. So, but there was a second half of this, Shea.
T-Raps. Puzzles. No, we just did puzzles. Let's do traps instead. That sounds like a better idea right now. Let's do that.
Yes. So traps, obviously, like traps like puzzles. There's a time and place to use them within your campaign. Some campaigns are going to have far more traps than other campaigns. And I think like for example, the campaign that we're building as part of this podcast, shout out to us, I guess. The setting has up to this point hasn't really afforded for a ton of traps. I think now that we're getting more into the intricate parts, climbing up that hierarchy, there's definitely more rooms for traps. So we may or may not go over them here, but they will definitely be in the final module. How I think of it is like, first of all, would this, being that they're after this big bad, this secret temple, would it have traps? Obviously, in my mind, because I love Indiana Jones, secret temples should always have traps. Like, if you stumble upon a secret temple and it doesn't have a trap, I'm disappointed.
Clearly not a secret temple. I mean, it is a binary proposition. It is either a secret temple with traps or it is not a secret temple at all.
Yeah, it can be a temple, but it's obviously well known because it didn't have traps.
Bingo!
This temple was not meant to keep people away.
Mimics are good traps if done well.
They're overplayed, I think, sometimes.
You definitely see in the D&D community, like, they get over-fantasized and, like, kind of like, ha-ha, hee-hee at, but I think if done well, and not, like, super frequently, but every now and again, like, if you find a real good moment to throw one in there, they can be excruciatingly fun.
Oh, I love using them.
I mean, they can be scarring, too, as one of our players already knows about.
He's afraid of bathtubs because of you.
I know.
In character.
Because of me, he cannot go into
careful. Copyright.
No. I changed all of the lyrics except for the first three.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. I think like traps, there's the classics, you stepped on a trick stone and now you need to make a dexterity saving throw because needles are shooting out of the wall to the other wall. There's also the classic, you stepped on a covered piece of ground. Now I need to make a dexterity saving throw because you're falling into a pit. So like those are classics for reasons, like they are sometimes kind of cliche, but I think like classics become classics because they work. And those are ones that early in my campaign, were not uncommon. And I used to ask way more than I have lately, so I need to dust off my hat a little bit, get back into it. My favorite thing to put the party on guard is, can you describe to me your walking order? And now they are all scared. And it's so much fun. Sometimes the best trap is no trap. You just ask a question like that and watch them squirm.
You know, you ask them for your marching order and then you just start rolling dice. I mean, when they hear that rolling of dice, they're like, oh no, what did I just get myself into?
If you ever need to silence your party, roll a dice.
Yep. For me, classic traps are like rigging a lock that a rogue has to pick.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't do well on that, then they can get shocked or, shot, poisoned.
Well, or if they don't pre-investigate, if they may miss the way to defuse the trap, so they may unlock the lock, but now they're stabbed or they're electrocuted or boom.
And as hard as this can be, DMs, the best ability with a trap is a poker face. The best poker face that you can put on will do wonders when you have traps like that.
I struggle with that poker face at times.
Yeah, the more paranoid you can make your team, probably the better it's probably going to go over. Like, I've heard stories of people just walking into rooms, like looking at statues going, oh my gosh, those things are going to eat us. And like, they're literally just statues. But at the same time, like the more that they like kind of ogle over it, you're like, you know what? Roll initiative. Because
I'm going to test my play group right now to see if they actually listen to these. Thing that I've been doing is trying to lull them back to sleep on it. I went a little surprise heavy for a little bit at the beginning of season 2. To the point that like they just started expecting there to be a surprise. They were suspicious about a cow mooing. Yep. So now I've been waiting. I have big plans, but I've just been waiting for when I can use these big plans. So I want to get them back into just, walk in there. Yeah, walk in there. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, the artificial doesn't have any anti-security measures. It's fine.
Their ADT is disarmed. It's fine.
Walk on in there.
I think with traps, too, so DMs out there, traps are a great way if you have somebody who's got a high AC and you're early in a campaign. So like pre-level 5, hitting somebody with an AC of 18 and not having an overpowered creature that they're up against that's going to make this a deadly encounter can be difficult. Obviously, there's ways around it in combat with like, stuff that makes them roll a save, dexterity save, constitution save, wisdom save, etc. But another way to kind of put that character on their toes a little bit is with traps. Characters that are wearing plate mail are often not the characters that have the high dexterity. Few exceptions, but often aren't. There's also, if they're great at wisdom, normally it comes at a cost of either intelligence or strength. They had to have that stat where they didn't pour into. And so you can have traps that rely on that. There's also, traps don't always have to be physical. There can be those more psychological traps where they have to roll a charisma, constitution, or wisdom or intelligence saving throw. So don't think that you are limited just to the classics. Like, it doesn't have to be there's 2 giant logs tied to strings held up by sticks and they tripped the pull string and now these logs come together, roll a dex save, and your rogue is of course going to save because they get a plus 25 to dex. And so as long as they don't crit fail, they're fine. My party, Shea and I, we both DM for large groups. So we have somebody who's strong at almost every stat. So I sometimes throw together a trap, not puzzle, but a trap, hoping that one of these characters is the one that'll walk into it and one of the others does. And so, they might save from it, they might not. Sometimes a character has great strength and the dice just says, no, you don't. They rolled a 2. So it's really hard to get there. Honestly, my favorite moments are when our characters who are supposed to be good at X. For example, my warrior my fighter in the group, I call him warrior sometimes, but the fighter of the group, he has like a +8, +9 or something like that to his strength save. I absolutely love it when it comes up to a strength moment and he rolls a 1 or a 2 because it's like, this is his thing. He's a big, buff, burly man and like he struggles to lift this and the wizard comes up and rolls a 18. It's like easily hoists this up. It's just funny moments like, hey, you did too many push-ups. You're too sore.
I remember my first trap when I was playing Pathfinder. I nonchalantly was going through this like dungeon area, and as a paladin was clearly thinking about what was going to kill me, didn't think about the tripwire that I stepped on. Keep in mind, I had an AC of 20 as a level 1 paladin.
Yeah.
Which was, back in Pathfinder, was pretty OP. And my DM was like, nope, I am not a fan of this anymore. So he threw rust monsters at us, and then my AC dropped by 6 points by the end of that fight because they ate all of my armor. But then again, I wasn't paying attention to traps, and so I could have probably avoided that had I been paying attention at that point.
That obviously was something, it was very catastrophic to your character. You took away one of your core strengths as your character, that high AC. Yeah. So your ability to tank was drastically reduced. That also, so like that, those were all consequences. And I hear there's players out there who are probably thinking, what a mean DM. I disagree. That DM did you a giant favor, because I know personally, as being your DM, that Shea, like we walk into a new room, Shea goes, I roll like Shea's like, I want to look around. What can I perceive? What's going on here? And sometimes I'm like, let me describe it first, buddy. And he's like, no, I am not stepping on a tripwire. So I roll a perception check. I'm like, tell me how you're perceiving it, Shea. And he was like, I'm rolling. Like, you are not getting me.
That is definitely something Shea would do. He is ornery enough like that. He would definitely do that.
You just third person to yourself.
I did, and I do, because, well, we don't have enough time for that. But all of that to say, kind of just to kind of like land the plane so we can get into our campaign portion of this episode. But
that was supposed to be quick.
Well, I mean, I work around airplanes, so I mean, I kind of have to do that. But as we're both flying our imaginary airplanes with our arms,
yeah. Sometimes it's good that you guys can't see us, but more to that maybe in the future. Let us know in the comments and emails and social medias.
All of that to say, like, I really value puzzles and traps, and I'll be honest with you, I also need to get better about throwing them in there because, and I don't think about it as often because I do a modular campaign right now, so like it's all kind of laid out, but that doesn't mean like I can't throw some in every now and again just to kind of play with the minds of my players and challenge them in that respect, and versus just role play, fight, role play, fight, just to kind of mix it up a little bit. That being said, Kyle.
Dun dun.
Let's talk about this campaign here. Last time on Dungeon Master Talk, we talked about...
There you go. There's your future as a radio host.
Oh, no, I need more bass in my voice if I'm going to do that. I'm a real boy! We were talking about how Balden made mention of a new... like the kind of the people that he works for. And we talked about having different cash points, if you want to call them that. We had like an info place, which might have been like a ancient library that they could get a bunch of information about the world and maybe what some of the plans of the whole Broken Divine in total are trying to do. There was one, I think I don't know if we called it like a weapon, like an armory type cache, because there's 3 of them. I'm trying to remember exactly what they were, but one of them was info. One of them was like the meeting point where the head guy of the Fractured was going to be. And then I can't remember the third one off the top of my head. But
see, those are the 2, the info cache, they were going to learn the name, Masuel.
Masuel, yes.
We spelled very weird. And then the meeting location and date. And then I think you're right. I don't have it in my notes, but my memory recalls. And so shame on my notes. Shame. I want the shame memes coming at me in the chat that we don't have right now. But I believe the third one is what I believe there was a like weapons cache, and partially why we want to do a weapons cache is because this world doesn't afford for a lot of great stores. So this is an opportunity to introduce some better armor, better weapons, maybe a magic item or something that you can kind of equip your party with so that they can have fun.
Oh, I just thought about this.
See,
what if the Splintered has captured an artificer to man the armory for them? But this guy is also like an alchemist, so he can enchant weapons. He can build you magic weapons. Now, granted, for the right price. But if you can befriend said artificer, you can maybe save him from the Splintered. And
I like this because I'm currently replaying X-Men Legends 2, and I'm just thinking like, this guy's Forge. Like he's Beaster Forge, where he's like, you go to him for your equipment. He he needs you to give him that magical in-game currency that doesn't seem to matter any other time, but then he will make you cool stuff. Yeah, I love that idea. And that is also an opportunity to introduce a fun new character. And since we introduced a fun named character, we made it, therefore we must name it. Go, Shea.
Oh, darn me.
Oh, you didn't have a name. No looking at things in my background is spelled backwards. We've used that too much. What if his name's like Artie, short for Arthur? Because he's an artificer, Artie, also Arthur. Yeah.
That's
Am I taking the lame exit? Am I exiting stage lame right there?
I feel like it's
too safe. We gotta go.
For me, it's like it needs something. It's gotta be like 4G, if that makes sense. Like it's gotta be.
Sounds like they man to forge.
Yes, like they command whatever.
Or woman to forge.
I say we should make them either a dragonborn or a half-orc.
Ooh, I'm already intrigued. I love either. I think.
Or a gnome.
Gnomes I love throwing in gnomes. Because you have the vast variety of roleplay options with a gnome. You have your jovial gnome. You have a sarcastic, snooty gnome. You have like the hoity-toity gnome. Like there's so many. I don't know. I just feel like sometimes I'm overwhelmed by choice options when I go to introduce a gnome, so I don't. Because it's like, what do I really want here?
We could throw in a halfling too, because they don't get as much love as a gnome.
Yeah, I blame that because they got a lot of love in Lord of the Rings.
Here's what we're going to do, because we're DMs. We're going to roll for it.
Roll dice.
Yes, I'm going to find my percentile. Oh, here, hold on. Let my mic follow me. I'm going to find my percentile. I'm going to roll percentile, and we're going to say that 0 to 25% will be Dragonborn. 26 to 50 is going to be a half-orc.
Oh, I should be writing this down. We're not going to remember our percentages.
I got percentages. Let's see.
0 to 25,
Dragonborn.
26 to 30, yeah, Dragonborn. 26 to 30 was what? Halfling? Half-orc?
Half-orc. Let's throw the halfling at 51 to 75.
Do we have 31 to 50?
Well, we have 26 to 50.
Oh, that's 26 to 50. Oh, duh. I'm dumb. 26 to 50 is half-orc.
51 to 75 will be halfling. And we'll do 76 to 100 will be a gnome. So,
all right, roll for it, sir. It's a gnome! Okay.
Sorry, Dragonborn. I tried.
All right. We will use a Dragonborn in this pre-built at some point. If it's not described on this podcast, it will be on the actual written module when that comes out someday.
Eventually.
It will happen. We just gotta, have the time to go back and listen and compile.
Okay, so we have a gnome. And this gnome, I mean, for a gnome, I can go with Artie. That fits.
Yeah, but now I want to have more fun with it. Because, I mean, it is growing on me to a degree, but I want, maybe Artie's their nickname, but I want their real name then to be ridiculously long. So they're they say it, and then they're like, but you can call me Artie.
I like it.
Arteronimus of Focalius the Third.
Write it down. Write it down.
Why do you do this to me? All right, so Artinonmunlus.
The third.
So that's Artinunmounlus. Few. Then second word, Fugallerus. So Furg. Gaul. How do you do Gaul? Aullerous. The third. So I. So
the third.
Oh yeah, the third.
Is the French accent with the third.
I'll let you do that. I gotta practice for hours to do one that's not insulting. And then, but you can call me Artie.
You can call me Artie. And yes, so we'll say that he runs this forge deep in the bowels of this abandoned mine that they have fortified. So they actually took some steel and forged kind of build this kind of underground fortress.
Yep. And this is how they've been getting cool stuff.
Yes. But we also have to figure out where they've been mining the material components for some of their spellcasting type stuff. So that'll be a sub arc that we need to plow out at some point.
Yep. I think, like, why would he build for this? Like, so I think he was captured and put here, but he built for them because of his extreme love of creativity. He can't help himself.
Yeah.
You give him stuff, he will create. And so when the party liberates him, he's like, listen, I'm just going to keep creating stuff. I can do it for you. But, like, this is where I love. You give me stuff, I will build. But it's like, I'm going to build in either way. It might as well be for you guys.
I thought about this too, because, like, currency and coin isn't really a thing yet because we've been trying to rebuild the world, right? So they're going to have to figure out some sort of trade system for goods and services rendered.
You bring me food. Just how I operate. It's like, all right, if money doesn't exist in this world, then what's going to be the most sought after thing? Well, food and water, because you need it to live. Yeah. And then magical things. Like, you know, the next thing is this world used to be robust with magic, now fairly devoid of it. I want my magic.
That. I'm sure he would take gold coins because then he could either melt it down and make something out of it, or keep it for whatever he wants to, you know, buy or whatever. When that, it's not that currency doesn't exist.
Yep, which makes it far more valuable than what it once was. So then that's the third cache. We have the name and we have the location out of the info cache. So then so I guess, like, there's multiple things that they can go for next. They can hit that, they can go to that location, date, time.
We should probably figure out.
Yes, I figured that's why I wanted to bring that up here. Because even if it's out a little bit, that's like in my mind, the next actual big story. Mm-hmm. There's stuff like if you set that out enough, obviously there can be, you do tasks for Artie, you can go back and do some tasks for the town, level up, and now you're ready to go again, because it's in the town. If we're setting it out like, hey, this meeting is 2 weeks out, then that's also time the town can progress during that time. So we can now maybe have a little bit more established in the town so that there's a little bit more at home base to go back to. And now, especially now, maybe like Artie has transplanted into the town. So the town is starting to kind of hum on like a development standpoint, and you have home base, established of where you go to buy goods.
If we find Artie at the armory that they've built, right? Are we kind of, I'm assuming that we're making Silver Forge kind of the home mecca or home base for, the party, right? So if that's,
it's natural.
If that's the case, when they bring Artie back to Silver Forge, well, two things actually, now I think about it. Does he set up shop in the mines kind of north of Silver Forge?
That'd make sense.
There's that. Number two, how does Mama respond to that? Because now she has a goods rendering part of society on top of their smithy, on top of their tavern. How may she kind of try to swing that too?
So I think, like, immediately Mayma's going to be a little bit frustrated because now this is the city progressing outside of her direct influence, which it's not meant to do, but also it can be a major source of power for her if she can win over or manipulate Artie into, yes, make this stuff for the party, but make your good stuff for me. Make me better stuff than you do for the party. Because, like, she would be, in my mind, aware of how he served, but he would not be aware of, like, how she played into everything.
Correct. Yes, I would agree with that. All right, so we should probably name the armory. Need to come up with something that's for the armory.
Armory names are hard because I just always am like, it's the armory. It's a little bit different. Like, this is not going to be your typical armory because I don't think Artie, being an artificer, is fulfilled. Like, he probably would, but he's not fulfilled being like, all right, I made your 100 arrows.
No, maybe we can see what the Splintered would have named it. For some reason, the Steeled Stone keeps coming to mind for the armory because it's underground.
I like that.
They reinforced it with steel, so.
Yeah, the Steeled Stone. I like that. I don't have an alternate, and I loved that one instantly.
So until we can think of something else.
I was going to sit in silence for a while, and that's not great podcasting.
Breathe in the sound. Okay, so we've named the armory.
We named two things. That's doubling our quota.
We need lottery tickets because that doesn't happen often.
Yeah, level up.
The library. The closed tome.
Dude, you're on fire. Like, seriously, you need to just go right. Like, you're in the zone right now. Listeners, sometimes you witness it.
Don't give me a pen and paper because I'm left-handed and I won't be able to read it anyway.
There's some left-handed people who are great handwriters.
I am not one of them.
Whatever that's actually called.
Southpaw's writing. I can't even read it. But anyway, okay.
I think I'm ambidextrous because it's so bad either way.
Fair. All right, so we've got the closed tome, the sealed stone, and now we need the meeting place. We need the meeting place.
Ooh, so the meeting place could be named, but maybe it's not a name that immediately the party would know. So maybe in that like time between now and that date, they have to figure it out.
Ooh, TBD.
You know,
okay.
Yes. So that also allows us a little bit more time to think of it, because what I'm thinking is like it's not one of the former cities.
Yep.
That's been destroyed, because that would be too easy. Obviously, then it's just like, well, go ask around. Somebody knows. Or there's an old map. I think like maybe it's a code name set by the Splintered, and so now they have to scour. They have to scour what they found at the info cache. They got to scour what already knows.
So I think in that case we've named two of our 3 places, but let's spread them out on the map arbitrarily because we haven't drawn it yet. Okay, so Silver Forge, if I remember right, is kind of in the heart of the map, and we've got our various different climates because your different ecosystems. And let me see if I can find those here so I don't screw myself up here. Okay, so to the north we have woods. I like the idea of the north being where the closed tome is, because that's more wooded area. That's more, I'm going to say that's more like high elf area territory where that would have been. Maybe towards some mountains up top in the northern, real northern section. I think that we should put because we haven't done anything with the south yet, I think we should put the sealed stone in the south. Like, so they're actually going to split these up. Okay. And then let's go let's go to a coastline, either east or west, for the third one.
Maybe we set the meeting date like more significant amount of time out to allow for that travel, but that can also allow them a few more encounters and an opportunity to discover more about the world past and make it more sense for them to be a little bit higher level. That way, what we encounter at this meeting place can be a more fun encounter than what they've had previously.
So at the start of this arc, I think we're saying that the party is going to be at about level 5, I think is what we decided.
Yep.
So by the end of the third part, would we say that they're about level 8, 9?
I think 8 or 9 is a good landing point, because the jumps at these higher levels become more significant.
Yes.
And so more can happen between levels 5 and 6 than what happened between levels 3 and 4.
Yeah.
You're going to go through a lot more. So I think aiming for being at level 8 or 9 is really good. And they can encounter more nomadic tribes that can be fun and interesting. So then ultimately, let's all that will be included in the module. We'll fast forward. So then this encounter at the meeting place, I think it would be fun if like this is where we start getting out of like, hey, it's a person or, like a standard character and into like there is one of those at this meeting that they'll see, but then maybe this is the first time that there's something supernatural that they're encountering, whether that be like we're level 8. So what can you, or we're nearing level 8. So like we're either level 7 or we're level 8. What would be a fun thing to encounter here that either it's like, oh no, we don't want to fight that scary bad, or like it's going to be tough. So then we can cut out the delay here a little bit before we answered that, because I didn't precede us.
Get my DMG and just figure out what that kind of power level would be.
Same.
Let's put that in a parking lot next session so we can actually look that up.
Yep.
And then we can name.
That will be, stay tuned to episode, this will be 18, so stay tuned.
Yeah, parking lot for next time on Dungeon Master Talk. We'll be naming the meeting place and the actual quote-unquote head of the Splintered will end up being.
This time we talked obviously about puzzles, traps, a little bit of our campaign. We would love to hear your stories on puzzles and traps that you've used in your campaigns. Also, let us know your thoughts on the campaign we're building. Let us know your thoughts on Artie. Sorry, my dog just barked in the background, so you get a little bit of that fun real-life background noise. Please let us know all those stories and your thoughts on email at dungeonmastertalk@gmail.com or on X, formerly known as Twitter, at DMTThePod. You can also hit us up at Facebook at the Dungeon Master Talk Facebook page, and now on Instagram with more posts coming because I'm learning from my wife on how to do so and not make them lame. That's why they've been a little bit slow because some of my thoughts aren't great for social media, I guess. At DMT the podcast. Just meaning that like the pictures don't line up with the words very well. So Rachel's like, hey, you know, think of something more clever than that. And I find myself put on the spot, so I don't do it well. So
as we talk about every time, like we just appreciate you guys tuning in every month that we drop an episode, and we appreciate that you guys spend that time with us, either just listening or as you're doing whatever that you're doing. We just really appreciate that you've joined us and spent that time with us, because I know time is valuable, and hopefully this is bringing value to your games and to your life by listening to this episode. So we've got some game updates, bro.
Yes. And this time I actually have one.
Yay! I haven't played my May game yet, but you have. Kyle, take it away.
Fresh off the death of the hired hand Chad, the party then approached the small city of Featherkeep. This city is ran by a clergy. They are both the political and the spiritual leadership of the small city. They are there in search of horses to make their way to the capital city of the country that they're in. I've named Harthen. In this town, first thing that they encountered that was bizarre is they were not allowed to bring their weapons into the town. The town was very strict about that. The next thing that they encountered was that the town has basically set up a refugee camp in the center of it to handle and help people who have been hurt by ongoing orc raids that appear to happen nightly to the city. And so there was a lot of triage tents, and in one of these tents, the party actually met a new player character, a new player to our party. We had two join us this session. First was a cleric who's going to be able to provide some much needed healing to the party that they've been missing. He played a fun old man character that would randomly drop some super funny knowledge bombs and then go back into like not fully being cognizant of where he was at. The party's trying to deduce if that's an act or not. And then they also met a priest who was very hoity-toity and charged them ultimately through some stumbling miswords by one of the other members into going and taking care of this orc problem on behalf of the city in return for horses. So if they go take care of the orcs, the city will give them horses for free. Otherwise, the city will not let them have horses because they claim to need them to get rid of the orc raiding parties. So they went into the keep itself, where they met our second new player character, a Dragonborn Paladin. And he has been there because his purpose is to, in life, is to get rid of orcs and goblins. So he came here when he heard about the orc raids, has been nightly trying to defend the city against the orcs solo. And so he welcomed the party's aid to help him go take on the orcs. They went and set a trap for an orc raiding group and managed to pounce a small group of orcs and take care of them. The orcs did have trolls with them, so it was a fun combat for the group, as we are all now level 6. So there was 6 level 6 players present, with one being a basic action on the combat. So the trolls made it more difficult because they were, of course, regaining health at the start of every turn. The party didn't know that, but they were. And so they handled the orcs fairly easily. There was 4 orcs, 2 trolls. Good combat, fun times. They role-played a fun scenario where they used the cleric as the center of the bait by having him talk to the wizard at a fire in the open while they had a lot of magic spells going to make it sound like there was more people present in the camp to attract the orcs. And then the cleric demonstrated that he can fly, and he flew into the air to avoid getting hit. The paladin tanked a lot of blows, so they both played their roles pretty well. They were able to successfully defeat the orc party, and it was a good time. And so next time we'll figure out if that was enough to earn them horses or if there's still more that they need to do for Featherkeep.
Wait, you guys did what? And your paladin and who? I can't
That's
believe
my
you
line.
do that. Hey, fair is fair, right?
I'm so proud of you.
Real quick, cleric is a cleric of
I would
life,
have to relook at my notes, but yes, I believe so.
and then I'm suiting Oath of Vengeance for
Yes.
the paladin. Oh, hey, nailed
Yeah,
it.
look at you. It's like you're an experienced DM. I'm proud of you. So, listeners, there's fun backstory to these characters. I'll see if the player's okay with me sharing more of it in the future in my updates or not. If they are, I'll try to include some snippets here and there when it makes sense to include them.
All right, everybody, it is time for Shay's game update, brought to you by me. I'm my own sponsor in this one. So anyway, last we left off, the party had found a deep, dark cave that had some purple mist coming out of it, and they had sent a couple people in there to scout it out. And when they came back, they thought they would win an easy fight. Turns out that it was a little bit more than they bargained for. They ended up fighting some earth elementals and almost fell, but they ended up prevailing in the end. And then at the start of this episode, they continued to go farther into the area that they were in. And this is kind of one of the deeper parts of this particular cave. And so they went and they found a thing called a Zorn, which is a earth type creature that speaks Terran, and it loves to eat like gems and gold and silvers and like precious metals and things like that. So, and then it had a cultist that was trying to like keep it happy and stuff like that. So the scouts found that one and dispatched that pretty easily. They continued to make it down the corridor. They did a skills challenge. And they ended up failing that one, unfortunately. The rolls just were not with them on that one, and that's okay. Then we ended the night with a fight with 3 driders. And for those of you who aren't familiar with those are like drow type spiders, kind of like a minotaur, where it's like half horse, half person kind of thing, only it's half spider. So they were getting kicked for a little while, and then they started rallying. Their dice decided they wanted to play and did a pretty good job of that. So, yeah, all of that to say, the party is still finishing up that fight. They've got 1 Drider left, and so that's where we will pick up in the next installment in June. And I just wanted to clarify something because I did some math on the back end and I was incorrect. I thought we had been meeting for longer than we had consecutively, but we had actually met for 17 months straight instead of 20, which really in the grand scheme of things is not that big of a deal. But I just want to really say I'm really proud of my players for making this game a priority for our group. And, and sometimes we don't get to play the main campaign just due to, life. If we don't get enough people to end up playing because of, life happening and stuff like that. And that's fine. But we've just been consistently just meeting every month to play some sort of D&D type game. So just really proud of them and a story that they're creating and that I get to help create with them. So all of that to say, we're excited to finish the fight with the Drider and then see what happens next. So with that being said, I'll throw it back to Kyle and Shea.
Listeners, thank you again so much for listening. It means so much to Shea and I. We're just 2 guys who love tabletop role-playing games and love to talk about them, and it blows our minds that you would listen. So we really appreciate it. Seriously, if you have any thoughts whatsoever about the topics that we're covering, future topics you'd like to hear us cover, thoughts on the campaign we're building, thoughts on how nasally I do or do not sound from week to week,
you can yell at the audio engineer at dungeonmastertalk@gmail.com.
Yes.
We know that our audio has varied and it has definitely gotten better once Shea took over those responsibilities for me. So shout out to Shea. And I know I do not always make it easy as I move around a lot and vary my distance from the microphone. So guys, he does a lot to try to make me sound okay.
We do apologize. The last couple of times we've had some technical difficulties, so please bear with us. We are working to get those fixed I know towards the back half of last episode, it was a little patchy, so please bear with us. Apologize for any inconvenience. And for all of us here at Dungeon Master Talk, I am Shay.
And I'm Kyle.
And we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Peace.